So now let's talk a little bit about syntactic island constraints, and in particular, as many of you in the Maryland audience I'm sure know, these involve wh dependencies. So just to review sort of the salient parts for our purposes, let's consider this kitty right here. This lovely kitty was bought as a present for someone, and Lily thinks this kitty is pretty. So here's what we might want to ask. Who does Lily think the kitty for is pretty? But we can't. Notice the frowny face. Hopefully you are making a similar one. Instead, maybe we have to kind of break it up a little. What does Lily think is pretty, and who does she think it's for? Like, we can do it that way, but we just can't do it this way. And why? What's going on here? The answer is that there's a dependency between the WH word who and where it's understood, which we're going to call the gap. Right? There's a link between those two positions, and this dependency, this link, is not allowed in English. Right? One explanation is the dependency crosses a structure that's called a syntactic island. Right? You can't cross an island. The metaphor is you're on an island, therefore you can't get out of it. Right? You're stuck on the island. Right? So that's our metaphor. Your dependency is stuck on this syntactic island. It cannot cross out of it. Okay. And so this is an example of a subject island, and there are a couple other ones. Let's just walk through again some of the salient ones for our purposes today. So let's consider our pirate Jack. He's known to be somewhat tricksy, and he claimed he bought something, right? And so here's what you might want to ask. What did Jack make the claim that he bought? Except you kind of can't. Again, it's kind of squidgy and unhappy because this is another type of island. In fact, it's a complex NP island. So let's go back to Tricksy Jack. He claimed he bought something, and Elizabeth wondered if he actually did, and if so, what it was. So here's what she might want to, want to ask about that. What did Elizabeth wonder whether Jack bought? Except we can't, right? Another island. This is going to be a weather island. Let's go back to Tricksy Jack. He claimed he bought something, and Elizabeth worried it was something dangerous, right? Okay, this is what we might want to ask. What did Elizabeth worry if Jack bought? Except again, you kind of can't, right? Because this is an adjunct island. So something that's important to keep in mind is that as far as we know, it's not about the length of the dependency, right? We can demonstrate this by sort of increasing the length of our dependency and seeing that it really doesn't get quite as bad as these, right? So here's Elizabeth. What did Elizabeth think? This is fine. And now we add Jack into the story. What did Elizabeth think Jack said? Okay, and now we maybe add Lily into the story. What did Elizabeth think Jack said Lily saw? Right? It starts to get a little confusing about who's doing what, but it's not bad. It doesn't feel bad in the same way that who does Lily think the kitty for is pretty feels bad, right? So it's not about length. You can have pretty long dependencies. It seems to be something going on structurally in these cases. So what we do know is that high SES adults judge these dependencies, these ones right here, to be far worse than many others, including others that are very similar, except that they don't cross syntactic islands. This is work from Sprouse and colleagues 2012. So these judgments are then a measurable, observable behavior that signal the successful acquisition of syntactic island knowledge, right? We can measure that and say, hey, if you are showing that kind of judgment pattern, you seem to have syntactic island knowledge. And I'll show you how that works in a moment. But for our purposes, the important thing is that these judgments can serve as a target for successful adult-like acquisition. This is an outcome that we can measure, which is very important. We want to be able to have measurable outcomes.